Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. We've got quite a few folks on the line today. Before I get started, I do want to let everyone know that our presenters and myself are experiencing some light flickering. So in the event that we lose the feed or that you lose us, we will try to get back up and running as quickly as possible. So apologies in advance if that does happen. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you very much for attending today. We're planning on getting started very soon with our speaker. But before so, I just wanted to go over a little bit of a technical debrief. My name is Jeremy Martel. I work with the Cape Breton Partnership. We are Cape Breton and Unamagi's private sector-led economic development organization. Thank you very much to Develop Nova Scotia for being with us today and for speaking on the Internet for Nova Scotia Initiative. If you have any questions today, we're using the Zoom webinar platform, and there's a Q&A tool either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on where you have it situated. I see someone already typed it in. Someone says they can't hear me. I am just going to ask, let's see here. Can anyone else let me know either in the chat or I can hear. Okay, we got lots coming in that they can't hear. So Barbara, if you can't hear me yet, I have dozens of I can hear yous. Barbara, there might be an issue with your speakers, but if you fiddle with that, we should be okay. This presentation will be recorded, so in the event that you don't hear me or we don't get this figured out, we'll make sure that you'll be able to watch it later. So again, if you have any questions, please let us know in the Q&A tool. Several of you have found it, so that's fantastic. We're going to be holding questions until the end of the presentation. However, we're going to try to get to everyone. If we don't, apologies, and we will try to reach out to you at a later time. Before we introduce today's session speaker, the Cape Breton Partnership would like to recognize that today is Orange Shirt Day and ask today's participants to keep its history message top of mind today and into the future. Thank you. Today's update is one that we recognize as one of the fastest growing factors for families and businesses to be able to carry out day-to-day life in our modern world. COVID-19 has absolutely compounded our needs and challenges around reliable access to broadband internet, and it's never been more important for Cape Bretoners to have this connectivity and its access. One of our roles at the Cape Breton Partnership is to connect Cape Breton entrepreneurs and companies from any industry to the supports, information, and resources that they need to be successful. And there's no denying that today's update on rural internet access fits into that category completely. For today's update, we're going to be hearing from Deborah Page at Develop Nova Scotia with support from her colleague Braden Clark. And so with that, thank you for joining us today, Deborah. And I'm going to call you up if you aren't already on your way up.
All right, here I am. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I hope so.
I certainly can.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jeremy. We appreciate the invitation to come and speak to folks all across Cape Breton, and we're very happy to welcome you into our conversation this evening. So thanks very much for being here. I have a short presentation that I'll go through to give you a bit of a background as well as give you a sense of where we are in terms of an update and status. And in that, and as I go through, I will try to answer as many questions as we've received so far and to date. We get questions in every day, and we try to answer those as quickly as we can. So we will try to cover off some of those questions, and then obviously we'll open it up at the end for more questions, and happy to take those as they come. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background for those who don't know who Develop Nova Scotia is. We are a Crown Corporation of the provincial government, and you may be more familiar with us by our former name, which is Waterfront Development. And some folks may wonder why we went from managing waterfronts and strategic land assets, such as the waterfronts, to managing a high-speed internet initiative. And it actually does make a lot of sense because our mandate now is province-wide, and we're focused on creating great places across Nova Scotia that help to attract and retain folks in Nova Scotia to live and work and play and start a business here and grow one. So Certainly, we all know, as Jeremy pointed out, that the internet is very, very important to being able to do that. And certainly the lack of internet access we see as a very significant barrier, and one that we're trying to eliminate through this initiative. So happy to go through some of the information that we have to share with you today. So I'll start with something that we do every time we have an opportunity to speak with people, which is to review the approach to this project. And it may be repetition for some folks, but I think it bears repeating. So we looked at all the data that had been gathered previous to us taking this mandate on and this project on. We consulted with municipalities. All municipalities were invited to participate. We did that a number of times. And we've carried that through until today with more than 75 presentations and outreaches to organizations and areas, as well as probably many touch points along the way with individuals, probably around 1,800. So we've talked to a lot of people, and what we learned from that helped to actually helped us to frame up the strategy and the way forward. The first thing is that we are focused on reaching as many Nova Scotia homes and businesses as we can with access to reliable high-speed internet. We have stated a goal of more than 95, and we were very confident we could reach 95, and we were very confident that we could exceed 95% coverage of Nova Scotia homes and businesses. We have always been careful not to promise 100%, because what we do know is that there is always a home or a business in an area that, from a geographic or a topography or some other specific issue, will be very unfeasible to reach from a network perspective. And so as opposed to promising something we know we can't deliver, we've said we're going to try to get as close to 100% as possible, and we're very confident that we will get very close to that 100%. We're also focused on outcomes and not on technology. I think we learned from past projects that were very prescriptive on what technology needed to be used, and what ended up happening was that whatever the technology that was chosen quickly became obsolete, and the customers were left behind, and we didn't want to see that happen. What we wanted to do was recognize that there's lots of different technologies that are available, and also lots of those coming online. And so we wanted to focus on outcomes. So what is it that people need? They need reliable, high-speed internet that either meets or exceeds minimum standards, and the minimum standards are set from a federal perspective, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. We've always known that in order to actually get as close to 100% of homes and businesses covered as possible across Nova Scotia, that we'd have to use a mix of technology. We looked at the cost of providing fiber everywhere in the province, and from a federal or from a monetary perspective, it is just absolutely not feasible for us to extend fiber to every corner of the province. There's not enough money provincially or federally to help us do that. So we needed to find a way to get everyone on a level playing field, and to level out the marketplace so that we could continue to encourage investment over time. We have set our minimum speeds for this initiative. And again, those are minimums. All projects need to either meet or exceed them. And in fact, the vast majority of projects that have been approved through this initiative far exceed the minimum standards. But the minimum standards are set in order to actually ensure that we are setting a baseline that is consistent across Canada. And there's lots of other initiatives that are underway federally, looking at how we address this across Canada as well. We wanted to line up with that and with the regulators of the telecommunications industry. And so the minimum speeds that we've set are 50 megabits per second download and 10 megabits per second upload on a wired service. So when I say wired service, that means a fiber to the home, like a FIBE service through Bell, or a coax to the home, so something that would be provided by a cable service. But it is that big wire right into the home, and usually provides speeds that far exceed 50 megabits per second. The other speed that we've outlined is a 25 megabit per second download and a 5 megabit per second upload on a wireless signal. And so by wireless, that means either a signal off a tower or a satellite signal. And so either of those have to meet a 25.5 speed to begin with. And we've also further asked for those proponents or those that are suggesting this type of technology to actually prove to us and demonstrate how they will go from a 25 to a 50 in a prescribed amount of time. So this last round of projects that we announced, we require those folks who are using wireless, if that was the case, which none are at this point, but if it was the case, they would have had to actually show us how they're going to get from 25 to 50 in a 4-year time period. So we would like to get everyone up to that 50 megabit per second speed. One of the other things that we heard consistently across the province was that folks were concerned about whether we would hold the service providers accountable to deliver the services that they promised to provide, and that they are also delivering quality service over time, and that they are measured to do so. So we've looked across the jurisdictions around Canada to find out what other jurisdictions were doing, and we found some examples of that. And then we looked at that and further strengthened those agreements with some fairly experienced telecommunications legal expertise, and we feel we have what we believe to be a very strong service level agreement that we're signing with every telecom or every internet service provider, and we're going to hold that agreement for the next 10 years, and they will be monitored in terms of the speeds, but also other measures of the quality of service. So we will measure speed, so internet speeds that they're delivering, and those internet speeds need to be delivered at the times when people are using them, not at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we will measure at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock when there is lots of traffic on the internet in terms of people doing homework and accessing services. We'll also measure things like packet loss and jitter, which are technical terms that impact the service quality. We'll also look at downtime for service and the average time that it takes to correct those downtimes if they occur. And many other things that we'll be managing and monitoring over time. And I would like to also point out that the minimum speeds that we've set right now correspond with those that have been set federally. We also have in our service level agreements that should those, and when, because they will, when those targets change over time, then so too must the service delivered by the service providers that we're signing agreements with. So for example, if next year the CRTC decides, you know what, 50 is not good enough, we should have 100 megabit per second download as a baseline, then our baseline changes to 100 megabits per second, and then all of the service level or service providers have to meet that new standard. So that is also outlined in our service level agreements. So I also wanted to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about our pre-qualified providers. So at the beginning of our process, we reached out, and we've done it twice now, issued a call for those that are interested in becoming a part and playing a role in the initiative that we have underway. And what we asked them to do was to show us and demonstrate to us that they had the experience, so the technical experience and organizational experience, the human resources required, as well as the financial capacity to build the type of network that needed to be built to be able to address the issue across Nova Scotia, and also that they had the capacity and the ability to move forward with a significant amount of public funding. So that was a bit of the process that we needed to go through in order to actually vet those that would carry through with delivering network to Nova Scotians. You'll see by this list that they're
Deborah,
both. Yes.
Sorry to jump in. Would I be able to get you to share the screen?
I'm sorry, I thought I was.
No, not a problem.
Okay, what's going on now? I was sharing my screen. Hold on now.
Happens.
Technical difficulties.
This is
Okay,
better than the power going out.
that's right. Okay, and share. You see my
Perfect.
screen?
Certainly do.
And play from current slide. There we go. Are we good? Okay, awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So you'll see by the slide that there that all of our providers are both large and small, known and unknown. Some include municipalities as a part of those in conjunction and in partnership with internet service providers. Some are on their own. Some you may be unfamiliar with at this point, but they are looking at new technologies that might well come into play as we carry through with this initiative. So just wanted to share that with you. Those folks all received the last round of call for projects to cover off as much of Nova Scotia as we could in that round. So let's just take a bit of a summary and to give you a sense of where we are and where we've come from. So we issued our first call in May of 2019. And in February 2020, we announced our first round of projects early in February, where we were able to show that 42,000 homes and businesses across Nova Scotia would have access to high-speed, reliable internet. Those projects were specifically asked to be able to be completed or substantially completed within 6 to 12 months. We were looking to get connections moving early and to get some of those projects that were a little bit further down the design and engineering cycle, get those moving. And then we would reach out again and try and get the next round underway as well. So those projects started immediately following that February announcement. And then of course, COVID hit, as we all know. And as Jeremy said, became even more urgent if that was at all possible, but it was. And so I think we all learned how important that kind of technology is to us and how important it is to have. The need was never in question for us, but certainly put a little bit more of a push on the urgency. The province committed an additional up to 15 million to accelerate the projects that were already approved and underway. We reached out to every one of our service providers that had a project that was approved and underway and asked them what it would take to make them go faster. And in some cases, it isn't money. In some cases, it's about capacity, it's about resources, it's about regulatory barriers, it's about a whole number of different things. So it's not always easily fixed from a monetary perspective. We did have success with some of the service providers coming back to us with some proposals, and we were able to speed up the connection of about 18,000 homes and businesses in Nova Scotia within about 6 months. So August of this year, those 18,000 homes and businesses, we can say they now have network to get connected to reliable high-speed internet, and the service providers are connecting those customers as quickly as possible. And the rest of those projects continue on. And I'll talk a little bit about timing in a minute. The second round of projects were announced just recently, September 1st. And in those projects, which in this case all happen to be Bell projects, just so happened that they scored tops in all of the regions. But of course, the round before, we had 5 separate internet service providers who were awarded projects. So it just so happened to be that way. So those projects will be providing access to an additional 32,000 homes and businesses across Nova Scotia. And those projects are underway now. So when we look at those, the first round of projects we announced, the most recent round of projects that we announced, plus a couple of independent projects that are underway in Pictou and in Annapolis County. If you add all of those access points together, we reach about 97% covered when all of those projects are complete. And I'll talk to timing in a minute. The 97% is good, but it's not done, and we don't think it's enough. So, probably the biggest message that I have today is we aren't done, and we're still working. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing right now to try and cover off the folks that remain uncovered or underserved. Also want to talk a little bit about investment. Many folks will know that in 2018, the provincial government put aside $193 million into an independent third-party internet funding trust. That money is held there. We do not, from a Develop Nova Scotia, hold that funding. We don't make decisions on the funding. What we're charged to do is to design the process, design the strategy, design the competitive process, run the competitive process, do the due diligence, evaluate projects, score them, and then make recommendations to the trust for funding. And then they are the ones that then review our work, make a decision to fund or not, and then the projects get approved and funded from there. Then we take it back from there and monitor the actual build of the projects, as well as, of course, the delivery of service once that network is in place. So early on in the process, there were a number of federal projects that were announced way back in 2016, 2017 that had identified provincial funding. And so it made sense for that funding to be provided through the Internet Funding Trust. We reviewed those projects very quickly off the top, and the trust approved funding to a number of those projects, and about 500,000 went out of the trust into those projects to get them moving as quickly as possible. Most of those were focused on middle mile, so that big fiber pipe or the big pipe of data that goes into the community, not necessarily to the homes and businesses. So it wasn't kind of that end user connection, but nonetheless, just as important. And so that's where 500,000 of the trust dollars went. The first round of projects we announced in February, $51 million was committed from the trust in order to actually move those projects forward. And that includes the $5.6 million that we spent to accelerate those projects and getting those 18,000 connections made early on. The most recent round of projects that we announced, we committed $60 million from the trust in order to move those projects forward. And so you'll see that there remains a little over $82 million in the trust right now. Those funds we are looking to use to extend service to those that remain unserved and underserved. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So that work is underway. So there are dollars there in order to actually extend coverage further across Nova Scotia. Just wanted to make a note that the dollars that are committed from the Internet Funding Trust are not the complete cost of those projects. There are some municipalities that have identified funds that have been used to contribute to some of those projects. Some do, some don't. It doesn't really disadvantage or advantage the municipality in any way. It just it's extra dollars that go in to try to make this work across Nova Scotia. I think it's important to note, however, that $102 million was leveraged through the private sector. And when I say that, that means that every one of the service providers that's got an approved project also needs to invest in those networks. And so, you know, the investment level of what the private sector is putting in is almost on par with the investment level from a trust perspective as well. So I think that's important to note. So just a little bit of a sense on progress. This is not a coverage map. It's not meant to be a coverage map. It is meant to be to show progress in terms of where we started and where we are once we've finished the builds that are underway right now. What this shows is back in May of 2019, we would have said that we were about 70% covered with a 50 megabit per second service. And you can see that the purple areas on this map indicate where there was high-speed internet already, and you can see that they're kind of clustered in more urban areas, which is not surprising, and then kind of filter out into some of the more rural areas. You will see that the white areas are those areas that were in need of high-speed internet, and the green areas that are indicated with trees are meant to indicate that those are areas where there is very low or no demand. It's in the middle of Kejimkujik National Park, or it's in the middle of a wilderness area. There are bits and pieces of white in some of those areas, certainly indicating that there are pockets of homes that we know about, but for the large part in those areas, there's not a lot of demand. So that's not, you know, we're not going to try and cover the whole province with big pipes when there isn't a need. for big pipes in those areas. We want to make sure that that we're using our money where it needs to be used in order to actually address the issue that exists. So fast forward to the most recent announcement. So as you'll see, once all of the projects that we announced in both of our rounds, so round 1 and round 2, as well as those couple of independent municipal internet projects are complete, and we've indicated that all of those projects will be complete before or by summer 2022. I'll talk a little bit more about time frame in a minute. That at that point we'll be 97% covered. I think the most important thing is that the white areas that remain are areas still in need of high-speed internet, and we're not done. We are working, and we are already working on how to actually extend coverage to those areas, those white areas that still exist. I'll talk about that in a second. First want to talk a little bit about timing. So you'll see when we started in May 2019, we were at about 70%. The projects that were announced in February started right away. As you know, there was acceleration that was put to play there, so that by the end of August 2020, just before we announced the new round of projects, we had gotten to about 78%. So that was with connecting and making connections available to those 18,000 Nova Scotians. So that's 18,000 out of the 42,000 we announced in that first round. You'll see that that first round of projects, all of those should be complete by March 2021 or before. So you'll note that if you go onto our website and you click through to Internet for Nova Scotia Initiative, the website has had quite a bit of work done to it so that it's much more intuitive and more searchable. You can search your community up at the top in the search bar, and you can also go through and look into the zones to find out which zone you belong to and look at all the projects that are underway in all of those areas. If you go into those and look at some of those that were announced in round 1, you will note that most of them have estimated completion dates, which should be all before March 2021 or at March 2021. So again, all of them complete by that point, but many of them coming on board October, September, before that, December. And the other is for most of those, you will start to see that should already be there coverage maps. And the coverage maps show you exactly where the service is being extended in terms of communities and roads and so on. So that's kind of round 1, all complete by March 2021. And then the most recent round that we announced just on September 1st, that work's already underway. Engineering and design work is underway on all of those projects. And so it's important to note that those will come online in stages. There's a large front end process that goes into the extension of this kind of complex infrastructure. It is front end loaded. It tends to be a lot of work that you don't see until then you are all of a sudden see work in your community, and it tends to be closer to the end of the process. That's just the way that these projects work. And so we expect that we will have, of those 32,000, there'll be about 11,000 that'll come online by the summer of 2021, another 10,000 or so by the end of 2021, and all remaining, so all 32,000 by summer 2022, and which will take us to about 97%. And you'll see that there's a blank under that in terms of what's next, because we're not done. And if there's one message that I want people to take away from this, is that we're not done. So I'm going to keep repeating that. So this work has already started, and we are very confident that we can get higher than 97%, and we're fairly confident we can get pretty close to 100%, and that's what we're working on right now. So just a bit of a context around us in comparison to the rest of Canada, and I think it's important because I think it helps us to, as we move forward, to attract people to live and work in Nova Scotia, and I think everyone will recognize that population is a bit of an issue for us in terms of economic growth moving forward. So when we looked at Nova Scotia in comparison with the rest of Canada, we looked at access to coverage at that 50 megabit per second target speed by population in rural communities. So we stripped out the urban areas. Most of the urban areas across Canada are well served. It's when you get out into the more rural areas and the less dense areas that there tends to be a bit of an issue. So according to the CRTC communications report, we rank 4th now across Canada in terms of coverage in rural communities. So that's a good thing. It's not the best it can be, and we think we can be much better at that, and that's part of the reason why we've undertaken this initiative to begin with. We also know that at the completion of this build, based on where most of the other provinces are and what we know to be their plans, that we anticipate Nova Scotia will lead the country in terms of the level of coverage that we have across Nova Scotia. And again, important to know, my guess is we won't be there for long. Everyone across Canada is working to do the same kind of thing because the issue exists and it needs to be addressed. And so everybody is really working hard to try and fix this issue. And so it's nice that we might come first, but we're not going to be there for long. And so I think it's just important that we work it and push it forward as quickly as we can. In addition to that, I think it's really important to note that Nova Scotia, we're moving about 50% faster on most steps of the project implementation when compared to industry norms. The reason why I say that is because at a certain point, as I said before, dollars do not make the projects move any faster. And at a certain point, we'll reach a capacity where it's just not feasible to move them faster than they're already moving. And so we just have to continue to make sure that they're progressing, that they don't stall or stop, and that they continue forward and try to meet the very aggressive timelines that we have set out for them already. We're pushing really hard. We will continue to look for all opportunities in terms of regulatory barriers and other means, permitting and so on, to try and alleviate any issues that the service providers run into from an implementation and construction perspective. And we'll always look for ways to move them faster. But at a certain point, we do reach a capacity issue, and that is with them bringing in resources from outside the province and other areas of their companies and resourcing up in certain areas. That's already being done. So I just want to kind of temper that a little bit from a reality perspective. So where are we in Cape Breton? So after round two, both in rural Cape Breton and Cape Breton Regional Municipality, which we have separated into a couple of different zones, we have projects in all kinds of communities across Nova Scotia, and I think it would be take far too long to list them all. But certainly, all of those communities are now listed on our website. Whether or not we have complete information for those yet, we may not, and I will explain that in a minute. But certainly, we have approved projects in a whole number of communities across Cape Breton. And so I would encourage you to go online at our website to actually put in your community and search by Cape Breton Regional Municipality as well as rural Cape Breton, and you'll see a lot of the different projects that have been approved. So we reached approximately 17,000 homes and businesses with the most recent round of Cape Breton projects, and those we expect to be substantially complete, as we said, by June 30th, 2022. They're all Bell projects, well, some of them. So this probably includes round one as well. So there's a mix. Most are Bell Canada projects, which are wired to the home, fiber to the home, and some are Seaside Communications, which is also a fiber to the home, as well as an upgrade to existing coax. So there's a couple of different things happening there. It will indicate when you put your community in who the service provider is that's providing service in your community. And acceleration efforts, as I said, are always in place to complete ahead of schedule if we can. I'm going to take just a moment to explain what the difference between underserved and unserved is, because I think it's important for those folks that remain outside of a named project at this point and are wondering about status. So when I say unserved, it means there's a home or a business and they have no access. So there's no possible service that they can go and get that provides them high-speed internet, just not available. That's unserved. Underserved is when we have a home or a business that has access to an internet service, but it doesn't and is not capable of meeting the minimum standards. So it doesn't even purport or promise to reach a 25 or a 50. Those homes and businesses we consider underserved, which means if you're not getting that minimum standard, you're on our list. and you're on our list to try to make sure and figure out how we actually extend coverage to your home and business. And we know where all of those locations are, and I can talk a little bit more about that as we progress through. So what now? Again, back to that message that I want everybody to hear. We are not done. We're focused on finishing the job. And so as we ensure that all of the projects that we've announced to date move forward with no delay, accelerating where we can, making sure that they're delivering what they say they're going to deliver, and getting those connections made as soon as we can. We estimate there's about 10,000 remaining homes and businesses across Nova Scotia that still need access to high-speed, quality, reliable internet service. And we estimate there's about 3,200 of those in Cape Breton. We knew that these homes were going to be in small pockets scattered across the province, and indeed they are. And we knew that that they were going to exist after this round. There's actually fewer left unserved than we perhaps thought there might be. So we are and have very quickly moved towards trying to figure out what the solutions are to address those. We started before the announcements even got made to try to figure out, okay, here are the folks that are left. How do we extend? How do we reach them? What are the solutions we can find? So there's a number of things underway already, and I'll talk a little bit about what those are. So we have a number of weeks back reached out to all of the service providers that have negotiated agreements with us. So they have projects approved in all a number of different areas across Nova Scotia. Every one of those has been reached and asked, can you extend your current project, so the project that is approved with us, can you extend to reach to these areas in this specific zone or area that remain unserved? What would it take to do that? Can you expand your current project to reach those people? And what would it take to do that? That information is flowing back to us now. So once we get that, we'll take a look at that, evaluate it, make some recommendations to the trust, get approval. And once that comes back, we'll negotiate an amendment to the agreements that already exist with these companies and get those projects underway as quickly as we can. The idea here is to get them moving in at least the same kind of time frame that our most recent projects are moving. And so hopefully, again, try and get those in the queue, moving along in parallel, so that they too can be substantially complete in the summer of 2022. That is the goal. Once that step is done, we will also look to reach out to all of our pre-approved service providers in each of those areas where there remains homes and businesses that need to be covered, and we will be then giving them a small area to say, okay, here's a pocket of 10 homes or 100 homes or 20 homes or 56 homes. What's it going to take to put a service in there and provide these folks high-speed internet? And we will get those proposals back from those folks. And again, we're asking them for a much smaller jurisdiction. So we're asking a smaller question, so we should be able to get a quicker response back on that, because we're not asking them, what can you do in all zones across the province? So again, once we get those back, we'll take a look at them, evaluate them, and again, make quick recommendations to the trust and try to get those moving as well. Once we've done those two, if there's still folks remaining that need to be served, we can always invite another request for proposal. We wanted to try this first because we think we can get it moving more quickly. Now that we've met our procurement requirements by going out to the market twice for all zones across Nova Scotia, then that allows us to now negotiate directly with service providers. So we think this is going to be a quicker path forward, and that's why we're doing it this way. We do reserve the right, of course, to go back out again with a full call if we need to. And we can also look at lots of other different things in terms of, services that we haven't even heard about yet. So one of our service providers is SpaceX, which runs Starlink. And if folks are familiar with that, they're doing work in low Earth satellite, which is very promising work. And they are interested in Canada, and they are one of our approved providers. We did that because they've got new technology, and we don't know what that might mean for us, but we do know that there's lots lots of really good research around that, and that it looks promising. They are right now working through the CRTC to get themselves registered as an internet service provider. That is something they need to do in order to operate in Canada. But there'll certainly be someone that we reach out to say, you know, we've got some remaining homes, here's some pockets, you know, is there a pilot program we can put together? What does this look like? How can we engage you to try and reach as many of the homes and businesses that are left unserved as possible? So those are all possibilities as we move forward. So I'm going to go through a couple of common questions that we get from the public. We do try to answer every question that we get. We do have a bit of a backlog right now, just based on the volume that came in. You know, we're asking for patience. We will respond to every one of them, and we're working our way through them. So we're going to get to it as quickly as we can. I think the biggest question we get is from folks that are in the communities that that got projects that were just announced at the beginning of this month, and they want to know if their street or business, if their home address or their business is included at a street level address perspective. And that information is not it's not done yet. And so while the service providers know kind of the general areas that they were going in, there's a lot more design and engineering work that has to be done on the ground in order to actually plan out their route and look at make-ready work, look at permitting, all of those kinds of things that come into play as you're working through a complex infrastructure project like this. And so once that design and engineering work is done, and there's a good sense of where the service is going to be extended to, much like you see in round one projects on our website now, you will start to see coverage maps be added to those projects, as well as estimated completion dates once that becomes known. So that information is not something that we're holding back. We don't have it yet. When we have it, we'll share it, and it will be posted to that site. And it's also often provided to the municipalities, some of whom choose to post them on their sites as well. We hear from folks that say, my community was not announced in this most recent round. Am I going to get left behind? What's happening? And as I said a number of times, we're not done. We know where the folks are that are left uncovered and unserved. We are actively working to try and find solutions for those projects or for those homes and businesses. And we're confident that we can do that for most of those. We know where the remaining pockets are, and we're actively working to try and figure that out. And we know the urgency, so we're doing it as quickly as we can. We often get questions about price or cost, affordability of service. So I want to be really clear about this. Affordability was really important to us to take a look at as we went in. We looked at some of the other things that have been done in the past, the ways in which it's been managed in the past, which was not necessarily the best thing for consumers. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we put in place was going to be the best thing for consumers and was going to allow you to have the best service available along the way as technology evolves. And so what we put into our service level agreements is we put terms in those agreements that set out cost competitiveness. So if I in Halifax have a fiber to the home service, so I have FIBE, and you in St. Peter's have FIBE, same service, same package, I don't have any extra bells and whistles. What I pay should be the same as what you pay. And that's what we've set out in our agreements. And we will monitor that on an ongoing basis to make sure that that is being met and that that doesn't change. So we wanted to make sure that folks were able to actually have a comparable cost. People in urban areas aren't subsidizing those in rural, and nor are rural customers paying more than, say, I'm paying in an urban area. In addition to that, we received questions around, are rural areas going to have an inferior service as opposed to urban areas? And so, again, we're not focused on technologies, we're focused on outcomes. And so all projects that we look at and put forward and recommend for funding must meet or exceed the minimum standards. So whatever there is, whatever the project outlines, it's got to meet a 50 or a 25, and if it meets a 25, it's got to get to a 50 within a certain period of time. The vast majority of the projects that we've approved deliver much higher speeds than we've set out from a minimum perspective, but we are trying to bring the whole province up to a minimum standard or better so that we have a level playing field. Again, we're not technology focused, we're focused on outcomes, priority being making sure that high quality, reliable internet is available to as many Nova Scotians as we can. We receive a lot of questions around low income affordability, and this is indeed an issue and certainly highlighted through COVID as well. So something that is very much at the center of a lot of different organizations thinking. I would like to point out that our mandate from a Develop Nova Scotia perspective, there's a couple of different things around access. One is, do I have a networked access? So is there an actual service in my area that I can access? If you don't have that, affordability doesn't really matter because you don't have a service to access. And then the other question is it affordable? And so we know that affordability is an issue. We also know access is an issue. Our mandate from a Develop Nova Scotia perspective is to actually extend the network to make the access available. That is our lane around this. But we also know that within government, there are lots of different people who have their eyes on ways in which they can bridge what they call the digital divide. And so they know how important it is to ensure that that all people are able to participate in the economy, and that we try to minimize those that are disadvantaged. So there are a number of different departments within government that are looking at this and actively figuring out how to address it. They're looking at programming and other things as ways to increase access and as well as improve and expand digital skills. A lot of that work's being done through communities, culture and heritage, education and early childhood development, and labor and advanced education, as well as lots of other people within government. So we do recognize that affordability is a really important part of this bigger question. It's beyond the scope of what the Internet Funding Trust was set up to do, but it's certainly something that I do want to emphasize, that there are lots of folks within government that have their eyes squarely on how do we actively figure this out and find some solutions. In terms of updates and community outreach, I did want to say that when we announced in February, we were trying to get out to community and drop in to all of those areas where we had announced projects and answer questions and meet with people and talk to them about how this would move forward. Of course, then COVID hit and our plans changed considerably. So in the meantime, while we were working through COVID, we were holding a number of different virtual meetings like we're doing tonight. We did a couple with Cape Breton Partnership, and thanks to their support for that. And we found that we were reaching quite a few people. And so when we announced in September, we said, well, let's get out and get a first swath of the areas done through a virtual plan, reach as many people as we can. It won't be the first time we come out in this kind of format. We'll come out again to the same area, and certainly we'll likely need to come out after October 17th, after the municipal elections, so that there'll be a whole new slate of people that we will want to update on our projects and bring them up to speed. Also wanted to encourage you to visit internet.developns.ca. It's searchable by community as long as there's a project in your community underway or approved. That will be where all of the coverage maps and estimated completion dates will be posted once that information is available from the service provider. It's also where all of the events like these will be posted. We'll also post recordings of the webinars as well as PowerPoint presentations for those that are interested. And so those are all things that we're looking at doing right now. We're also doing outreach through local media and partner platforms and some paid media to make sure people are aware of the webinars as we reach out. So I'm gonna stop talking now, and I'm gonna open it up and let's take some questions.
Thank you, Deb. Hi, everybody. My name is Braden Clark, as Jeremy mentioned at the beginning, and I'm with Develop Nova Scotia as well. I've been communicating with some of you throughout, answering the questions that I've been able to, which has been great. And there's a whole lot of questions, which is excellent. So I've tried to combine them into themes as best I could.
Okay.
So Deb, I would say quite a few people, and I'll link these two together, quite a few people are saying, well, what about the remaining 3%?
Right.
And linked to that, what was the process that led us to choosing, or led projects to being chosen, certain areas being chosen over others?
Certainly. So I will start with all areas. So every area that needed internet service, that didn't have it or didn't have adequate internet service, we actually asked for and invited proposals to cover as many of those as possible. So we basically opened it all up. All of them were included. And we said, come back to us with the proposals in order to cover as many of these as possible. So what we got back was what we received from the internet service providers. The reasons that some communities are in and some communities are out, all the reasons for those are not specific to one reason or the other. They vary. They can be about density. They can be, but not necessarily. They can be about proximity to existing networks, but not necessarily. They can be about the sheer capacity for the internet service providers to actually get back to us. It's a big ask when you go out and say, here's the province, here's everybody that needs service. Now tell us who you're gonna cover. So it's a big project for them to actually respond from a proposal perspective. So sometimes there's a time crunch at the end of that, and they can only get done what they can get done. And we have to make sure that we continue to move projects forward as quickly as we can. So we always knew that this was going to be iterative. We always knew that we were going to we were going to be able to eat the elephant in chunks or bites, but as big as bites as we can get is our objective. So we're always trying to make sure that we get as many as we can. So no one reason. It has nothing to do with municipal funding versus some municipalities funding versus others not. It has nothing to do with Cape Breton versus mainland. There are pockets all over the mainland that remain uncovered as well. It's really just kind of the process as it's rolling out. If there was a magic button that we could have pushed to say, connect everybody, we totally would have done that. Unfortunately, that's not reality. But it would have been great. But this is kind of the way, in which we need to do it. The 3%, as I said, we're not satisfied with 97. So we are fully focused on how do we get further, farther, faster. And so we are not stopping. And we have already begun to look for opportunities for us to extend that service even further. And we won't stop until we get as close to 100% as we can. Again, we won't be able to get, every home and business across the province. We know that's not going to be feasible, but we know we can get much further than we are. We're very confident that we can get a lot more. So that's what we're focused on right now.
And Deb, there's a lot of questions about service provider. So you mentioned Bell, of course, being awarded all the projects in round 2.
Yep.
There's questions about people who might have Seaside or ExploreNet. Can they stay with their service provider? Is Bell being forced upon them? And then linked to that, I would say, a few questions as well, and I know you touched on this, but I think it's good to lay out for people a few questions about pricing and price control and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so nothing is ever being forced upon anyone. It is totally your choice as to whether you choose to change providers. I will say that all of our approved providers, which includes all of those organizations that you've just mentioned, were invited to submit proposals for all areas that remained unserved and underserved. The best proposals that we received back, the ones that scored the highest and provided the best possible service for residents and businesses, were the ones that we that were ranked the highest, that we recommended for approval and funding by the trust, which I think most people would say that makes sense. That's an appropriate and reasonable and accountable use of public funds. So that is the way we're doing it. You are under no obligation to switch, and should you wish to stay with your current provider, that is absolutely your choice to do so. I will say that we will not fund multiple projects to cover off the same area twice. So if we fund a Bell project in a certain area, we will not come behind that and fund an additional project to go to those same homes, because that means that we would have to leave others out. And that's not something we're willing to do. We want to see how far we can get and how much of the Nova Scotia homes and businesses we can get covered with at least the minimum speeds. So I will reiterate, we're not gonna offer a couple of different services just so that there's choice. It would be nice, obviously, if we were able to do that. We're not able to do that based on the funding that we have available and the challenge that we have before us. So as long as we have a service across Nova Scotia to as many homes and businesses that can offer that minimum speed or higher, that is what our objective is. In terms of price, again, cost competitiveness. We want, if you're getting a service, again, if I get fiber to the home here in Halifax and you get fiber to the home in St. Peters, and it's the same service and it's comparable, we should be paying the same cost. So that is the way in which we've set up the service level agreements. They sign those service level agreements. We monitor them over time and ensure that they're following those guidelines.
And I would say a few questions as well around maps and civic addresses and how do I know if my home, my business, there's quite a few business owners that have chimed in.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know when and if my home or business will be included?
If you are in a community that has a project that was awarded back in February, and there's coverage maps and so on that exist in those projects on our website, and you still can't figure out whether you're in or out, fill out one of the forms that's on the website, send it in, and we'll take a look at it and try and get back to you to let you know and provide some clarification around that. If you're in one of the communities that was announced just in September, again, that information, it's not that we're not sharing it, it's not available. So there is legitimate engineering and design work that needs to be done by the service provider in community to figure out what the routes are, what streets it will go down, where it will stop, where it will end, where it will start. All of those things are being done right now. That information and that work is substantial given the number of projects. Oh, there goes my power. Can you still hear me, Jeremy? Good.
Or at least I could. Braden, do we still have you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I certainly can. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe Deborah lost her internet. We're going to give her a moment. This actually occurred in the practice run earlier today, where just after the power flickered, it shut off her Wi-Fi. So she just needs a minute to restart, I think.
I'm just looking here, Jeremy, at the questions. We got to most of them. I just want to make sure there's any here that I can answer. I will do that because I'm not sure if, who knows, we may not get Deb back.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, there's a question here about providing funding to community co-ops if they can expedite connectivity. So in that case, I think the answer would be no matter who the proponent or bidder is. I mean, if they're if their bid ends up being one that's scored the highest, then that's the route that we will take for sure. It's as Deb mentioned, it's not really about providers or technologies. It's about outcomes. Getting as many people as possible connected as quickly as possible. And you may know there are a couple municipalities as well that have taken this on themselves. So Pictou municipality, the county of Pictou, and Annapolis County as well. So that's another option that some municipalities are pursuing. So we are not. Oh, there's Deb.
Welcome back, Deborah.
Okay, so that's what happens when there's a storm out and I lose power for a second. So I can't even remember what I was talking about. Braden, what was I talking about?
That's a good question, because then I started talking and.
All right, well, let's go on move on to the next question, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, there's a couple questions here about phase 2. So when will we see maps for phase 2? Right. When will we see that kind of detail?
That was what I was talking about. So that work actually takes a little bit of time. So it might take a month or two for us to have some of that detail to share. But it is coming and it's being worked on right now. So as soon as it's available, we will share it. And then likely it will come in waves as well as they work through each of the different areas.
And a couple of questions here, basically about, is there set criteria? Are there set criteria? If I'm 700 meters off the road, or if I'm in an area that's not particularly dense. Are there set criteria that would exclude me from a service?
No, there is no set criteria which would exclude you. We're going to try to keep pushing it as far as we can. It may mean that in some areas we can't get fiber. So that, it's just not possible for a service provider to actually extend fiber. That doesn't mean they can't put up towers and have a very strong signal off a tower, or there might be a satellite option. So we'll look at all opportunities to try and reach as many folks as we can. And again, we're going to try and kind of push it as far as we can.
Great. There was a question here from the warden of Inverness County asking about Starlink, but I think you touched on it there as that being an option in some circumstances. Yeah.
It absolutely is. As we said, it's early yet with them just because they're not registered as an internet service provider from a Canadian perspective. They have to do that through the CRTC, which we understand that they're doing right now. But we have been in touch with them. They're an approved provider with us. We've had a number of conversations with us. They are interested in Canada. They know where Nova Scotia is, and they're interested in us and what we're doing. So that's a good thing. We will definitely look at that as a possibility, especially as we kind of push the fiber and tower signals and those kinds of things out as far as we can. Some of those less densely populated areas, and certainly in some cases where there is topographical issues and line of sight issues. And again, I'm getting a little bit over engineering here because I'm not an engineer, but from what I understand, there are fewer issues with lower satellites in terms of some of those barriers than might exist with traditional satellite.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I cut out a bit there too. And then the other question I see here that is a bit that we haven't touched on yet would be around any kind of penalties or accountability measures for providers.
Certainly, yes. That is what our service level agreements are set to do, is to actually monitor those. And so there are penalties associated with not meeting those guidelines and those standards. And those would be enacted by us if that's required.
Great. Thank you, Deb. I'm just checking here. We've got a couple more things coming in. Oh, okay. Yes, this was one question about asynchronous versus synchronous bandwidth. Now, in all honesty, I don't quite know the difference. That might be one for more of our technical folks, but maybe Deb knows.
That might be something for more of our technical folks. I mean, it's a really kind of a miracle that I said jitter and packet loss and kind of knows what those means. And so I would invite you to send a little bit more detail in terms of your question to us at info@ comment
Oh, okay.
and
Oh, sorry, Deb. No, we got a little more clarity on that. So
okay.
that means that the upload and download speeds are the same.
Okay.
So
Okay. I'm sure there are services like that. That is not the standard kind of minimum threshold that we've set, which we've made agree with the CRTC target speeds, and so that might be something that's more required when you have a much greater demand. So if you're in a business that has a higher data requirement, and certainly that is a conversation that can be had with the service provider. Again, once we get the fiber backbone network further into the province, then the conversations with the service providers in terms of providing that higher level service become a much different conversation, because they're not reaching as far back to try and connect into the big pipe, so the big data pipe.
and as we there's also a note here saying that typically fiber service is synchronous, so same upload and download. So in many cases, that would be happening. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not an issue for Vibe. From what I understand, again, I'm not going to speak to the speed levels specifically that come with a Bell Fiber service. They will be able to speak much better to it than I do. All I am aware of is that it's probably one of the best services that's available at this point.
Okay, a couple more coming in here. Question here about, Bell's current high speed, I assume in the area where this person is, at being advertised at 7 megabits per second. Does that qualify as underserved?
Indeed, it does qualify as underserved. That is not what we would deem high-speed internet, and is not what is really deemed high-speed internet from a Canadian perspective either. And so people we're getting caught up.
I think I'm just trying to juggle here between the chat and the Q&A to make sure I got to everything. I do think we got to most of them, Jeremy. I'm not sure if there's anything you noted, but I think we have them.
No, we did receive a few questions via email that were actually asked by others here or answered throughout the presentation. So I think we got to most of them, and the ones that we didn't get to, I think, were kind of repeated through other questions in more roundabout ways. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you for so many questions.
Hey, no, that's great. That's what we're here to do, is answer as many questions as we can. And as I mentioned, and I think on the last slide there were some email addresses and so on, and maybe Braden can pop them up into the chat as well. So the info@ address, the 1-800 number, and our internet address. Please, if you do have a question, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Just a little patience while we get through the backlog, but we are working through it, and we will get back to you. We respond to every inquiry that we get, and we will try to provide as much information as we can. Stay tuned to the website. That's where information will be posted once it becomes available, and we will continue to provide these kinds of virtual town hall meetings with great partners like Cape Cape Breton Partnership and others. And certainly when it's safe to do so, we'll look to get into community and answer questions face to face. We much prefer that when it's safe to do so. We can't wait to be back in community to be able to talk to you in person about this.
And we can't wait to host you in person in the future.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Deborah. Thank you very much, Braden. Thank you for everyone for attending. As we did mention, we're going to send everyone that attended the recording as well as the slides. In addition to that, they'll be posted on our website. And if you had any questions that you either didn't get a chance to ask, or maybe we didn't answer it completely like you had intended, please reach out to that info address and be as lengthy as possible.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
And
Have a
thanks
good
to all our friends at the Cape Breton Partnership. We really appreciate your support.
And thank you to our friends at Develop Nova Scotia.
All right. Awesome.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.